Dear ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Thank you. Dear ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Thank you so much.
Құрметті ханымдар мен мырзалар, для приветственного слова приглашается
We would like to invite the chairman of the Financiers Association, Елена Бахмутова. Good morning, dear participants to the Congress of the Financiers of Kazakhstan. Let me congratulate you with the Day of the National Currency and the Professional Holiday of the Financiers. On behalf of the Financiers Association, I would like to welcome you to the 8th Congress of Financiers, which is an annual event that puts together the professionals from the central bank, financial regulators, governmental agencies, parliament, and financial organizations. We meet during the period of speed transformations when digitalization and AI changed the nature of financial markets. Kazakhstan, as an actively developing financial center of Eurasia, tries to be as one of the pioneers of that process. We're ready for the international cooperation. I would like to pay special thanks to our foreign guests, the representatives from the central banks and international organizations. The major topic of the Congress is development of the financial market during the era of digitalization and AI. This requires us to think strategically. We need to integrate the new technologies into the regulations, ensure cybersecurity, develop digital currencies, as well as creating the conditions for the sustainable development of the financial market. We treat this Congress as a platform to exchange our views and have joint solutions developed. I would like to wish all of the participants of the Congress to have inspiring discussions. Now it's a great pleasure for me to give the floor to the chairman of the National Bank of the Republic of Kazakhstan, Mr. Suleimanov.
Көп рахмет, Елена Леонидовна.
Thank you very much, Елена Leonidovna. Dear colleagues and dear friends, welcome to the 8th Congress of the Republic of Kazakhstan. It is a tradition for me to congratulate you with the Day of the National Currency of the Republic of Kazakhstan. The Congress is dedicated to the issues of mutual importance. This event is purposed to have high-quality dialogue and have negotiations on the financial matters. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you to the Congress, and I would like to congratulate, firstly, all of the professionals, to include the managers and the frontline officers who contribute to the financial markets with the professional holiday. My sincere congratulations. I would like to give special thanks to our distinguished guests from beyond Kazakhstan, taking into account economic ties. We have invited the chairman of the central banks from all over Eurasian Economic Union, so we're going to be expanding the geography of coverage by doing so. So briefly, let me talk about the outcomes and objectives that we have envisaged. Of course, we have to tackle macroeconomic indicators, and the macroeconomy is at pretty decent levels. So we have 6+% of growth. We are expanding our investment into the capital, and we have good indicators in terms of processing industry, and other industries. Type, which is digital tenge, was converted from the pilot project into a standard operation, and we've been actively working with the government to scale it up and have conjoint solutions, as well as we have received full-fledged support from the president. Yesterday it was a very prominent event, and Kazakhstan was the first to launch the national QR. I would like to congratulate all of you with the launch of that initiative. And frankly speaking, we haven't planned it to have it done. Yesterday, there were many challenges of marketing, tariff nature, and so on. So that's a reference to saying that the national bank and the regulators and the second-tier banks could work together. So what are we planning for the next year? Of course, digitalization is going to be the identifier and actor, the start approach, and together with the agency, we have developed the strategy for 5 years for digital financial regulators. And those measures were precisely described, and we will keep implementing it in a full-fledged manner. And until the end of this year, what the plan is to launch a public digital fund for crypto reserves, and we also have started building up the national system for custodial storage of crypto reserves, and it is based on the basis of the central depository of securities. The next step is going to be using AI. We are building data-driven ecosystem, and we've launched the data fabric, and we mentioned about that during the pilot project. From 30 to 40% were digitalized, and the coverage is going to be expanded. We have AI agents for anti-fraud and DMT investment solutions and solutions enabling us to have the monetary policy developed. You know that within the framework of the package of reforms in regards to financial regulations, in addition to traditional banking, we launch a full-fledged regulated space that includes digital financial assets, and they are identified as a part of the financial system, as an integral part of that system. And this is a great signal for the institutional investors, for instance. And we have a very clear understanding in regards to how to implement the mixture in regards to the traditional financial performance as well as digital solutions. And for us, for the next year, for instance, we have other macroeconomic targets. Our intention is to have expansion of the securities market to include both digital and non-digital part, and I think that we will have a chance to reiterate about that and discuss in more depth the infrastructural and other changes in regards to securities market. And we would like to use the experience that we have currently. It is a pretty positive experience from AFC. I would like to greet the governor, so welcome. And you have a lot to do in order to make sure that the regulatory framework that have been introduced at AFC could be translated throughout the entire financial market in Kazakhstan. Of course, we will have to take into account the monetary policy and other aspects into account. Of course, the financial and banking sectors and other elements are going through the mixed period. We have record indicators in net profit, for instance, and at the same time, we experience a lot of challenges, and we need a support from the public at large and regulators. So this year, we have introduced minimal reserve requirements. We had the buffer of the capital, and the parliament has adopted the law stringthening the conditions for the public loan policy. And those banks who have received the assistance from the state now have to pay back before the initially identified period. Of course, we have to adjust the interests of the public, financial community, and so on. And I think that we have ensured the just treatment, and the owners of the banks now do have the adequate position, and they have fulfilled the obligations and commitments. And the common QR actually is one of the elements saying that, yes, indeed, we are true professionals, and even though we experience complex market conditions, we've managed to address those really problematic items. And on behalf of the National Bank, I would like to say that we will keep developing a stable functioning and developing of the financial sector, and we will raise awareness about that as a sector of economy, providing employment for thousands of our citizens, starting from cashiers, engineers, through the managers. And we do have the working professionals, you know, the security guards who provide the safety for fiat money, you know, are those at the front line, for instance. So we have to be the true leaders in the financial sector. So as a regulator, we will keep working in that regard, and the interest of the financial sector will be promoted by the National Bank at all of the levels engaged. Let me again congratulate you with the Day of the National Currency. I would like to congratulate the financiers of Kazakhstan with you being so committed on a daily basis in order to ensure the prosperity and wealth of Kazakhstanis. So thank you so much, and again, congratulations. Now I would like to give the floor to the chair lady of the Agency for Monetary Market Development, Madam Abulkasimova. Dear participants to the Congress, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear chairman of the central banks from the Eurasian region, we are glad to welcome you here. Dear representatives of the financial sector, regulators, the representatives of the National Bank, I would like to congratulate you all with the Day of the National Currency. And again, full-heartedly, I would like to congratulate you on an annual basis. This event is conducted traditionally, and this demonstrates our common way forward, and the intention is to ensure the macroeconomic stability and sustainability, as well as to create the conditions for the long-term investment. So Timur Muratovich has shared with the basic indicators, and in turn, I would like to keep you updated in regards to the outcomes. So actually, as a result of the last financial year, and during the panel discussion, we will have a chance to discuss our current issues as well. So the financial sector of Kazakhstan keeps demonstrating sustainable growth, and it actively supports the objectives of the country. And our assets now have 75 trillion tenge, to 51% of GDP. The growth is in every sector, and the banking is a foundation of the financial sector in Kazakhstan. So 67 trillion tenge is the banking assets. So the level of efficiency is over 20%, which is 2.5-fold, and the NLP is 3.5% currently, and the decrease was from 8% in 2020. The trust to banking system and financial system is growing, so now we have 45.7 trillion tenge, and the deposits grew up to 26 trillion tenge. So the financial inclusion is 85%. So the online transactions grew by 90%. So this is the testimony of the in-depth financial culture. In regards to the securities market, we have stable dynamics of growth, and starting from the beginning of this year, insurance companies number operated with over 20 trillion tenge, and the growth is 37%. The securities market is a source for alternative funding for private sector, for quasi-state sector. The capitalization of stocks is now 40 trillion tenge. For 9 months, issuers have attracted 80.6 trillion tenge, which is 5% more than last year. Micro loan institution is actively developing, and the activity grew by 15%, up to 3.5 trillion tenge. And the dynamic development of the financial market is supported by the key reforms that we conducted together with the National Bank and with the government. To follow instructions of the president, we have developed the loan banks, and we had the measures to stimulate consumption and have anti-fraud actions. And actually, I would like to mention about the new banking law, and that law is a foundation for the model of the financial regulations oriented for the best practices as well as supervision to ensure the sustainability and protection of the rights of consumers. So we have kept the best practices that we have developed through the most recent years, and we have contributed as well. And the reform in banking sector takes into account the results of the financial sector assessment results that was completed in 2024. I would like to remind you that we have ensured full compliance to 22 out of 29 principles, and in order to ensure the compliance with international standards at the regulatory level in 2025, we have completed the full-fledged supervision over the financial regulators, and we have conservation buffer up to 3%, and we have leverage in the amount of 3%, as well as NLP requirements were updated and refreshed. And we also do have the new corporate governance standards, and we pay our utmost attention to the role of the risk management, internal audit, compliance, and we now have the updated expectation towards the business reputation. Taking into account the provisions of the new banking law, Kazakhstan will ensure compliance towards the banking sector supervision. And we have also completed the measures in regards to develop the competitiveness, and in June we have provided the license for BNK from South Korea, as well as we transformed the KMF into the KMF bank, and we engaged to have more liberalization in order to have more players. We have the proportional funding, and two licenses will be used, universal and basic license. So we use the experience of Russia in regards to the basic license. So we have the proportional regulating that will simplify the requirements for the smaller banks, and we hope that we will have the regional banks while keeping the major principles of sustainability. And the third block refers to reinforcing of the investment into fintech companies. So this is something that we actively discuss. So what needs to be done in order for the banking sector to keep being innovative. And we provide the opportunities to fund in a wide spectrum of companies, taking into account the fact that those investments are risky. We are going to be identifying the constraints depending on the size of the capital. And Mr. Suleimanov has commented about that. Within the new banking law, we will regulate the financial assets. Some of the colleagues from Eurasian Economic Union have already been working with the digital financial assets, and we will try to keep moving forward. And we are going to be launching stable coins, other basic assets, property rights, as well as issuing the traditional financial instruments and digital tenge. And the fourth block is corporate loans, and it's really, really important, taking into account high inflation and monetary policy, and we work together with the National Bank. And from the regulation standpoint, we took the maximum measures in order to support the SMEs, taking into account strict monetary conditions, and we now have less pressure on capital syndicates, and it was decreased from 100% to 50%, and we had higher limits for liquidity, as well as we have the new guarantee foundation under the auspices of Demo Foundation. And the funding by Demo is provided not only at the from the fees, but also at the guarantees of the banks. And the current loans were provided in an amount of 267 billion tenge. We have funded 12 projects in the amount of 2.7 trillion tenge. The National Bank has initiated the loan funding for banks, and starting from 2024, we fund pension assets up to 7 years in the amount of 500 billion tenge. Besides, in order to stimulate the consumption loans, we have the coefficients, and the maximum limit is 350%, and it's prohibited to have loans provided for more than 5 years, and we also have the prohibition for consumption loans in case if there is over 30-year delays in payment for banking loans, and we had the new potential norm. And as a result, despite the macroeconomic conditions, as a result of the 9 months, we had 38.7 trillion tenge in assets in the banks, which is a testimony of the banking sector to remain the major source for loans. So, and the growth is assured at the level of 11.7. The third area is anti-fraud. And in June, we have adopted the systematic draft on anti-fraud, and we have so-called cold period for non-collateral loans. And that norm actually was introduced in the end of October. And besides, we also have other constraints. So the loan is to be provided in the personal presence of the client, and those norms were enacted in January of 2025. And besides, the telephone operators now have the anti-fraud system to have an ability to counter telephone fraud. And talking about the steps forward within the framework of the new law, we envisage to have full-fledged system to protect the rights of the clients, managing the behavioral risks, and there's going to be a standalone ombudsman dealing with these matters. So let me briefly talk to you about the insurance market. And the insurance market has a huge potential from the development standpoint, and it demonstrated a stable growth. And in order to seek for the protection of the rights of the clients, we steadily provide different types of insurance, and we have expanded the guarantees for the saving life insurance, and the insurance organizations were allowed to invest into IT companies in order to protect the property from natural disasters. The draft of the insurance from natural disasters as a compulsory measure is going to be introduced in 2026. The capital market remains our major focus, and we have completed the digital transformation of the securities market. And for the last 4 years, we have modernizing the monetary system, and we had the central counter agent, and we had the unified register, as well as the corporate register for issuers, and the ability for the European investors. So we have the relationships with Eurostream and watermelons and so on. And amongst the major objectives, we think that the national rating agency is going to be introduced, and the draft law is going to be provided for the parliament until the end of the year. And we have the new draft law on investment funds, and this is going to be the foundation for this activity. And what we plan to do is, together with the National Bank and the AFC, to keep working in this regard, in regards to ensuring the regulations for the securities market. And we also need to have the legal framework for the financial sector development. And this is something that we will continue in 2026. Allow me please to congratulate you with the holiday, with the Day of the Financier. And I have no doubts that thanks to your actions, thanks to the efforts taken by the financial organizations, we witness the high growth in financial sector, which is in the avant-garde of all of the changes to include the modification of technologies. And we will do whatever possible in order to ensure the sustainability of the financial sector. Thank you so much for your attention.
Конгресстің бірінші пленарлық отырысы өз жұмысын бастайды.
We would like to continue the first plenary session.
Мелис Тургумбаев, Эльвира Набиуллина, Аганес Хачатрян, Александр Егоров.
Good morning, distinguished colleagues, dear guests. I would like to congratulate you with the Day of the National Currency of the Republic of Kazakhstan, and with your permission, I would like to continue the international session in Russian. Thank you. So once again, I would like to reiterate that we are cordially congratulating you with the Day of the National Currency. So welcome to Almaty, distinguished guests, and the weather is almost ideal, if not take into account the quality of air. So we have 70 more minutes. In order for us to stay within the time frame, so in the end, we're going to be having a couple of minutes for Q&A session, as this is a truly unique chance for all of us to see the chairman of the central banks, and in 4 cases out of 5, they are the financial regulators as well. So 2 questions could be posed to each and every participant to the plenary session. So again, based on the topic the session is dedicated to, one of the questions is going to be referred to the monetary policy, taking into account the turbulence of and volatility of nowadays. And the second question is going to be referred to the inflation and the specifics of inflation. Of course, I have consulted with the organizers of this event before I took the role of the moderator. So what is going to be the sequence of presentations to be given by the distinguished guests? And now I have a pretty tricky approach, so we're going to be moving the directions, so from left to right and then from right to left, so that nobody is left without an attention. So we're going to be talking about the macroeconomic indicators first, and it took me a while before I took a decision. I got refreshed in regards to the financial performance. I have read the materials in regards to the inflation and the deviations from the targets. So I started, let me start from you, Mr. Suleimanov. So, and then we will finish with Armenia, so my congratulations. The least deviations from the targeted inflation is happening in Armenia. So actually today we have a unique chance, 2 participants to today's session, Madam Nabiulina and Mr. Suleimanov, have spent quite a decent number of years as the ministries of economy. Now they chair the central banks, and they're fully aware about what's going on from both sides of the coin, so to speak. So, Timur, could you please tell me, Kazakhstan has a very challenging picture in Kazakhstan, and good sustainability and growth. And on the other hand, just recently the National Stats Bureau has demonstrated that the mean salary dropped by 2% compared to 2024. It's not something that makes everyone happy. But at the same time, the inflation is already pretty high. And what is going to be our way forward in order to ensure, from one standpoint, not losing the economic growth tempo, and when it is needed, how is it possible to maximize the incomes as well as to have inflation at the decent level, at least 7 to 8%. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you so much, Mr. Jandosov. I would like to congratulate you and thank you for being the moderator of today's session. And yes, indeed, your mission is unlimited. So actually, nobody's going to be having the questions unanswered. And yes, so the deviations from the target, I was given the floor the first for having the worst performance. So thank you so much. And actually, the item of the agenda number 1 is how to put it all together. The high economic growth and the inflation, growing inflation. I don't think that there's a contradiction. The contradiction, for instance, the industrial policy, the agricultural policy, the monetary policy, the credit policy, the policy in regards to providing the assistance to the financial market, and the efforts of the financial regulators are based on the objective to make the life more prosperous. The growth in industry and economics overall is very essential. However, we have to translate that into the real income of the Kazakhstanis, because it is something that is really essential, and in this regard, the wealth becomes the most important issue. So actually, the growth is 6.5, and the salaries are dropping. Yes, indeed. And again, real versus nominal is something that we have to pay our utmost attention to. So inflation remains to be the first challenge. And on the other hand, we have a lot of inflation factors that are beyond our control. And at the same time, we also deal with the domestic factors that are the consequences of the decisions that we make. And the majority of those decisions and solutions is something that we need. And we have the measures to be postponed a bit. You know, in my introduction, I have mentioned about the monetary and budget policy, and actually we had to have more loans during the COVID times, and we had to make sure that the Kazakhstanis are exposed to more opportunities. Unfortunately, that tendency still remains, and a lot of money was taken from the National Welfare Fund, and we have pretty high levels of deficit in budget, and I think that the budgetary and the tax reform that has not yet been implemented, however, it is underway and being planned, you know, it has certain objectives, you know, to have better fiscal performance. And at the same time, it is going to be having a very strong de-inflation effect. So actually 2.7 to 0.9 target, you know, this is going to be the deficit, the transfer. And the transfers will amount 5.5 billion from the National Welfare Fund, and now it's going to be decreased to 2.8 billion. So actually, we are to have the law, we are to follow the legal framework, and our expectations are that there's not going to be any changes within the macroeconomic perimeter. Of course, it goes without saying that there's going to be this stringent budgetary and taxation policy with a moderate financial policy, and actually this is something that we understand pretty well. So, you know, those are the two handles of the acceleration. You know, you meant and of course, you will see the very modest growth, and then there's going to be a slowdown. So actually, while strengthening the budgetary policy, we will need to concentrate on much effort. And actually, we have other measures that are going to be ensuring a smoother effect on monetary policy. So in midterm, you know, the policy is to be neutral. It is to ensure the stable macroeconomic conditions, taking into account the internal growth in economy and balanced macro conditions. So we will follow that approach. Thank you. Thank you so much. Timur, for your explanations. Of course, it goes without saying that we are experiencing large-scale macroeconomic challenges from the start of the war and the structural shifting of the economy and the trade balance, as well as other challenges. And we are aware about the fact that your position is being criticized inside your country. However, looking from outside, Central Bank of Russia demonstrates independence, and it has a consequent policy. Undoubtedly, you keep an eye on the real sector of the economy, and you keep an eye on the performance of different segments in the economy. So actually, what tendencies do you see in order to address the slowing down of the growth in economy? And actually, the question is, what is going to be the next tendency? So, are you going to be growing and expanding? Thank you so much for your question. Good morning, and I would like to greet all of the participants to the Congress on Finances and congratulate you with the Day of the National Currency. And I would like to thank you to contribute to this Congress and to address this distinguished audience. And having listened to Timur Muratovich, despite the differences in our performance and indicators, our challenges are almost the same. Economy, despite all of the shocks of 2022, has restored itself pretty fast, and the decline was modest because we have the macroeconomic potential and stability intensified, and we also had very flexible conditions for macroeconomic performance, and the floating foreign currency exchange absorbed the risks that and shocks that we have been going through, as well as the ability of the market economy to get adapted to the situation. And during 2 years, Russia grew pretty intensely. The economy, after a slight decline, grew very rapidly, and that was thanks to the import replacement and exposure to new niche at the market. So we had soft budgetary policy, soft budgetary and tax policy, and eventually there was a gap in regards to demand and proposal, and this speeds up the inflation. In 2025, subject to soft budgetary policy, the current inflation in June was almost 2.5%, but for 6 months, because of the gap in proposal and demand, now we have 2-digit inflation in Russia. So what my message is all about, we shouldn't be missing the momentum. We shouldn't be having a disbalance in between the demand and proposal, as this has a direct impact upon the inflation. So in my opinion, the central bank is to act very actively, and our policy is to stimulate the priorities we have, create social commitments, and the objective for the central bank at the same time is to act as a balance in regards to the common demand, to make sure that the nominal income are not destroyed by the inflation. Our objective, actually, is to ensure the real wealth in people, and the businesses to have predictable conditions to run their business, and everyone is interested, to include the companies, to make sure that the growth is sustainable, not to have 2 years of stable growth and then we will need to harshly adapt ourselves to the new macroeconomic structure. So therefore, we are under pretty high inflation pressure, and the labor market reflects this message, and for a long time in Russia we have a pretty low unemployment, a bit more than 2%. It is lower than the macroeconomists call complete unemployment. And taking into account the limitations in physical resources, we need to balance and ensure the balance. Our target actually is to make sure that there's a balanced labor market. And we had a pretty harsh monetary policy, and we delicately make it less harsh. And the challenge is to go through Sila and Haribda to support the people living in Russia and to have less inflation. And at the same time, the growth is to be balanced. So the neutral potential growth is something that could be expanded. So we would assess it at the level of 1.5 to 2%, but taking into account the large-scale investments into the automation, and this could contribute to the potential growth of economics. And our objective, together with the government, we interact together to ensure a balanced tempo for economic growth in a long run, and to ensure the sustainability and low inflation. And low inflation actually is a basics for the sustainable economy. And I hope that our policy and together with the government we will be able to reach those objectives. Madam Nabiulina, Mr. Suleimanov has already made a presentation. Could I make an additional question? So, do you analyze the real savings in Russia? Are there any tendencies for it to grow? What about the gross domestic product growth, taking into account the low internal inflation? So, could you comment on that, please? Of course, there's a securities market, there's some peculiarities in regards to the banking deposits and so on. So in conditions of the harsh monetary policy, and the expected outcome is the growth in savings levels, and this is happening, I have to admit it. And the considerable part of income is something that people save, and the growth in incomes was so high that actually that allows us to expand both savings and income. And at the same time, we decrease the basic interest rate pretty delicately in order to make sure that the savings opportunity remain. And we watch over the inflation expectations, because the attractiveness in savings is identified not only with the current inflation or the annual inflation, but it also is something that is identified by the by the inflation expectations. For instance, if the expected inflation is going to be at the level of 13–14%, deposits less than that level won't be attractive for the people and clients of the banks. And this is something that we pay our utmost attention to. And at the same time, the interest rates for the deposits are attractive for the clients. The tempo is slowing down a bit, but still we have decent savings. And should the central bank have softer credit policy, and the interest rate will go down, and the savings will actually go to the consumption market, and the inflation is going to go up. But I think that this is not going to be happening. So what we do is we lower down the basic interest rate delicately. We analyze the dynamics in savings. And of course, a part of the deposits could actually be spent for the financial assets, for the immovable property purchase, and so on. I think that that's a very natural process, and we don't expect any drastic changes in that. Thank you so much. Kyrgyzstan and Belarus have almost the same deviations from the inflation target. However, let me give the floor to our immediate neighbors from Central Asia. So, Central Bank of Kyrgyzstan. Sir, the floor is yours. So, just a comment of lyrics. So, we tend to think that Kazakhstan is more advanced than Kyrgyzstan, but in fact that's not true. I used to be the Deputy Minister of Economy, and back in 1993, our holiday was introduced in November, but you had it next year in May. So actually, we thought back then that you would follow our steps, but actually, in fact, that's not the reality. You learned your lessons, and now you have a steady growth of 10%. The income is growing. The inflation is drastically lower than in Kazakhstan. So could you please share what challenges you've been addressing so far? So you have the interest rate elevated twice since this summer. So what challenges, please? Thank you for your question, and good morning, dearest colleagues. I would like to congratulate our distinguished colleagues from Kazakhstan with the Day of the National Currency. In regards to the challenges, I would like to support my colleagues, and yes, indeed, the global economy is characterized with challenges as volatility of the market, the trade disbalance, the lack of raw materials, and uncertainty in regards to other items and factors of economy. At the same time, regional trade and financial ties become more and more essential. Networking is more essential. So the external challenges are the issues that we have to address and adapt to. And now we have the growth of not less than 9%. At the moment, we have the growth in the amount of 10%, and we expect is even more by the end of this year. And as our analysts say, Kyrgyzstan is going to be one of 5 top countries in regards to the growth of economy. And the salaries are growing, the public is having more and more income. So actually we have proficit of budget this year, and we have envisaged to have the increase in salaries for governmental officials. And this year we have lifted the pensions up, for instance. That's a good tendency from one hand, but on the other hand, we have to bear in mind that this contributes to inflation factors. So our target is 5 to 7%, and last year we stayed within the spectrum. It was 6.3% in inflation, and this year, currently we have 6.8%, and by the end of the year we expect it to be 8.9%, and the interest rate was lifted, and now it is 10%. So our objective, the objective of the National Bank, despite the growth in the economy, is going to be following a very strict monetary policy, and our objective actually is to ensure the stability, the economic stability in Kyrgyzstan. Thank you so much, Melis. A small clarification question. So we are aware about the fact that for the payment balance and overall for the economy, transactions made by the individuals working elsewhere in Russia, Kazakhstan, Turkey matter. So actually, could you please make a reference in regards to the share of how much those individuals working abroad contribute to the payment balance of Kyrgyzstan, and how do you assess that factor? From one standpoint, that's an external source of funding. Those are the incomes that are not generated in Kyrgyzstan, but on the other hand, they're pretty stable, right? Because it has to do with the incomes every individual generates, even though they're working abroad, So actually this creates stability. Could you please add a couple of words? Yeah, sure. So taking into account the growth of the economy in Kyrgyzstan, we also had a harsh growth in construction market, and construction industry demonstrated the growth in the amount of more than 36% this year only. Now we bring the external workers. We would have migrants working in Russia and sending money back home to Kyrgyzstan. But this year, what we saw, and last year as well, there's a tendency of our Kyrgyz citizens coming back home from Russia, and we even had to engage foreign workers to contribute to construction sector, for instance. And despite the fact that our migrants coming back from Russia, the monetary transactions contribute to the economy, of course, and we don't see a tendency of those transactions shrinking. For instance, last year we had 2.5 billion in transactions, and this year, so it's 3 billion plus. And this year, despite the fact that the migrants are coming back, the amounts remain at the same levels. Thank you. Alexander, the floor is yours now. Of course, it goes without saying that your economy is very closely related to the Russian economy and the shocks. Madam Nabiullina was mentioning about eco in your case, in case of Belarus. And generally speaking, the situation is pretty positive, again, going back to the tempo of investment, the economic growth, and so on. So could you please tell us more about the challenges of nowadays, the proportion in regards to stimulating and the economic activity, decrease in inflation towards the target? And I also heard that your reserves in gold have also been grown, and the digital factor became very prominent, and the forex component is now very essential. So formally, the central bank of Belarus, do you have the targeted forex indicators, or you have some other approaches? Could you please elaborate more on that? Thank you. Thank you so much for your question. Good morning, dear ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to congratulate you with the Day of the National Currency of Kazakhstan. Going back to your question, so firstly, I would like to say that it took us a while to analyze the macroeconomic indicators. And something that we try to pay our attention to is the way enterprises and companies run their business. Going back to 2022, the sanction influence that we have experienced again, based on all macroeconomic models, was to lead to the collapse of the economy in Belarus. And we were supposed to stop completely, but for 6 months we had $12 billion coming from export was reoriented, and that's a great effort that our business made. We now have the new logistic routes. And now the businessmen got adapted to having new products, so imports replacement. It's a huge effort, to produce basic commodities like paper, for instance. The problem were of that caliber. But in any case, we managed to do that, and in 2023, 2024, we received a great figures in growth, and the growth in investment was even more. The position of Belarus at this current moment is that despite the fact that we go through the complexities that have to do with selling the product, as we are interlinked with Russia, however, we have to invest a lot into the growth in the long run, because without that, 5 to 7 years later, we could find ourselves in the conditions of the economic growth of 2016, in average around 1%. So the first thing to do is to make sure that the companies contribute hugely, and at the national bank's level, what we do is we intensify the private sector. We're looking for the new champions, as we call them. We are looking for those who are ready to demonstrate extreme growth in regards to the incomes of their companies. Again, let me go back to your question in regards to monetary policy. Yes, indeed, the success could be based on a couple of factors. So the first is interest rate policy. So the deposits provide a good proportion in regards to the inflation expectations and the current inflation. And currently we have historically greatest growth in deposits in the national currency, and 80% of them are those deposits for 12 plus months. And that's a great asset for the banks. And this enables them to provide more and more loans and credits. So the investment credit historically would be treated only within the time frame proportion, and now the tempo is growing, and we have 60% more compared to 2024, and that was done thanks to the stable credit base in national currency, and this enables us to have more investment. So your question was in regards to gold. So the price for gold is growing, and this was the first factor. And the second factor is the forex purchases by the national bank, and we still have the flexible forex exchange rate and neutrality. However, there's a demand for foreign currencies demonstrated by the individuals and non-residents living and operating in Belarus, and therefore we need to have some interventions to neutralize the forex exchange. And the imports also have higher strikes. This was something that we would dream about 8 years ago, and a monetary fund would tell us that we need to do a lot in order to have those indicators. But without limiting the internal debate, we managed to target that. So our international investment policy is something that we have to comment about. Without direct investments from abroad, a couple of years ago we had a minus balance in the amount of minus $20 billion US. Now we have almost zero, so we have much more assets in foreign currency, and we paid the debt out. The growth in economy for the last 2 years actually was accompanied with payments of debt. And actually, in ratio to GDP, that led to a comfort that we have not experienced for a long time in a row. So anyway, the economy in Belarus is stable, and we will address satisfying the internal demand thanks to the investment. And at the national bank's level, we have certain constraints for consumption crediting. That has to do with imports, as we don't have any limitations when it comes to providing consumption credits for purchasing the products manufactured in Belarus. For instance, furniture, the large number of pieces of furniture would be imported in the past, but now we have a very intensive growth of that industry. So the full value-added price remains in Belarus. So again, we had the full cycle, enabling us to have that money remaining in Belarus. Thank you. So off-topic question that would be interesting for audience. So the overall balance in regards to the debt, it's almost zero, How much debt do you have to pay to Russia for a nuclear station? I cannot share that confidential information, Yes, this is a confidential information and the state secret. You still have something to pay? Well, looking at the statistics in regards to the external debt, these figures were published. So thank you so much. It was very interesting to listen to you in regards to the external policies. Our chairman of the Central Bank of Armenia, you are the student of honor, and I've looked at the most recent agenda of your governmental meetings, and you said that the inflation risks are balanced. Is that true? Could you comment about the challenges? You have a very small, open economy, and you have gone through shocks because of the war. You had a lot of people who relocated from Russia, and it's objectively very hard to manage this challenging situation. Well, thank you so much. I would like to, again, congratulate all of you, and the national currency is the reason why we all gathered here together. The national currency is an important part of the sovereignty of any country and an essential part of the economy. So, almost at the same time we started the initiatives in regards to the national currency. So actually, let me start with why we need to have sustainability. In Armenia, our economy is very private. Everything is private in Armenia. We have nuclear stations, some of the high voltage lines, and the grid, but the rest is private. Our economy is open. We're open to exports, imports, and we almost have the trade turnover that is almost equal to GDP. So economic agents are very essential for us. There's no alternative public sector. Of course, we have mining, we have copper, molybdenum and others. Stand still. However, for the last 2 to 3 decades, we just had to keep financial stability with the help of private investment. And when it comes to savings, that became one of our priorities. And of course, we made a stake on the national currency and the shocks that we have gone through, not only for those that happened lately, but 3 decades are full of shocks, and we managed to manage those shocks. And the national currency is the leading factor of stability. Just a couple of references, with your permission, and the important components enabling us to keep it going. And I think that everyone is successful, not only Armenia. Inflation is not the only one indicator. So we targeted 4.5% for the last 15 years, and last year we have the new target, which is 3%. And for the last 15 years, we managed to have almost 4%, a bit less than that, and that happened thanks to the following. We do have fiscal policy. And if there's no discipline in regards to compliance, it's going to be too hard. It's almost unreal. So 2 items have to be taken into account. So number 1 is the sovereignty of the central bank. That's the key. Independence and sovereignty doesn't mean that we have not synchronize our work. So what is going to be a dance between the government and the central bank? Let me comment on that. The Ministry of Finance and the central bank, they always cooperate. They do experience a deficit, and the government understands at the same time that after couple of years of huge deficit, we end up with high interest rates, and then we have to deal with the consequences. That's inevitable. And we have to take into account the amount of the public debt. And we could actually tackle some of the issues in a more prompt manner. And actually, that the so-called crowd-out effect and the raises in interest rate actually has consequences. Although the private sector, everyone suffers from that. Of course, the economic potential also is very essential. If we spend this is something that could have consequences not only as it is as a capital performance. You could actually direct that money to social sectors like education and so on. So we have to make sure that we do have a balanced approach. As Madam Nabiulina mentioned, we have to look at the economic potential. If the economic potential is not getting intensified, we have to invest. We have to invest thanks to the low interest rate. But this is a way to nowhere. So we have to agree for a short-term decision, not to become a permanent decision. So the inflation expectations change, and we have to answer a question: who is suffering from those operations? So the inflation has consequences on every single individual So everyone has a family, business to run, and savings. And should inflation be high, it doesn't make any sense to keep saving, and it doesn't give an opportunity to grow. So the low margin in business actually leads to high-based flows of capital, right? So actually, to keep the market going, we need to have an attractive interest rate, and we have a threshold. We are the lowest inflation, and this is something that we tackle all the time. And I wanted to reiterate that an open, small economy provides for a very strong private sector, and digital stability matters. And of course, the institutional instruments also are essential. Again, going back to the stability of debt, the debt is under pressure. We need to have expenses for defense and so on, and we also have some important matters. Just to compare, we have almost 30 billion US dollars of GDP, 4.5 billion US dollars in gold reserves. That's just to compare. And 3.5 billion US dollars is the pension fund. So we managed to establish a good pension fund. And the majority of the debt, of the public debt, are the citizens of Armenia. And of course, we have some foreign assets that are being kept abroad. And we talk about the long-term investment schemes. And this is something that is really, really important. And the market, the clients have to get exposed to true opportunities to invest. We have to ensure that we have a nominal interest rate in the amount of 8%, and we had a growth in the amount of 4%. And actually, there's some structural items that are very, very important in addition to the net monetary policy. Thank you. Thank you so much. And actually, I would actually support almost every message that you have shared. So, Mr. Suleimanov, I wanted to reiterate that one of the issues that we do have is a small proportion of private capital in our economy. We keep pushing ourselves towards the quasi-public enterprises. However, we need to intensify the private sector. Thank you so much for mentioning about the pension fund, and thank you for the success factor in regards to the economic stability. As an author of pension reforms of 1997, I'd like to say that the chairman of the central bank actually is fighting to annul the pension system. Could you please tell us that you do support us? We shouldn't get deprived of the pension fund policy. So actually, we have 20 minutes left, a bit less. So actually, the entire spectrum of questions is there going to be any digital money, publicly supported stable coins? So actually, what position do you have towards the digital assets? Thank you. Well, the digital assets is something that everyone talks about, and we do have the legal framework, and starting from January of next year, we're going to be having the applications for licensees, and we don't think that that's an ideal solution, though. there's going to be many more modifications to the legal framework, as this is a speedy growing tendency. And in regards to the digital currency, let's have a philosophic approach. We do have a stable coin, right? So that's an asset that is linked to other assets. We also do have the private stable coins, again going back to private versus public. And we also have CBDC, right? So the currency supported by the central bank. The difference in between those currencies could be actually neutralized if stablecoin could be operated for the tangible collaterals, and somebody launched the stablecoin, and it actually is linked to public security, for instance, and the technology is known and is very, very transparent. Well, in fact, we're talking about the digital currency of the central banks, and we decided not to invest into the digital drum. We don't have that decision taken yet. And by the way, the Americans also are going through that dilemma. Hopefully, you have looked at US Act and the way they're moving forward. Europe has a different approach, and the time will demonstrate how we could actually go forward. But the short answer is that I have given to you, and we are mega regulators, we are responsible for the full-fledged policies. And actually the major topic is to make sure that we are not going through any litigations, any arbitration, and there's no risks for financial stability. In regards to the technologies, of course, the technologies are to be taken into consideration. If something new is coming, we have to be open to get adapted to those smart contracts and so on. And this actually could lead to the opportunity that we could use for the operations, for the open banking, for local transactions, and so on. So the major thing is to keep the target in your mind. Thank you. I forgot to mention about digitalization. Digitalization is not just linked to the money. So, do you have the QR code, the common QR code in Armenia? What was the reaction from the banks? Yes, we are going through the last integration amongst all of the systems that our second-tier banks have. I think it's going to take a couple of weeks, and we will launch until the end of this year. All QR codes will be interconnected, so they're going to be interoperable. That great news for your clients in Armenia. I'm not going to be repeating the questions. Could you please comment on your situation in Belarus? Well, thank you so much. Talking about the digital currency, we are now in the process of getting ourselves prepared for the digital currency, and our objective from January of 2026 is to have the testing of the digital Belarus ruble, and from 2027 the intention is to have it to have it in operation. So the objective is actually get through the transformation, and while introducing the technologies, we have to concentrate not on the fashion, so in the beginning that would be an attempt to get adapted to blockchain. And what we see is actually the budgetary payments is something that could be covered by those opportunities. We shouldn't be maximizing the budgetary expenses and public expenses in couple legal entities, and the question is in regards to imports capabilities when it comes to road constructions, housing, and so on. So using the digital ruble and smart contracts enables us to find solutions for the problem, to understand how much money eventually goes for imports. And on the other hand, we come to an agreement that the medical equipment, for instance, that is manufactured in Belarus is to be purchased by our local healthcare facilities. And then it turns out to be that the consumers purchase imported pieces of equipment. You know, we have to fix it at the technology level, where it's prohibited to use money otherwise. And the third sector is transboundary payments. We are linked with the Central Bank of Russia in regards to interacting two digital currencies and harmonizing the payments. And the last idea, we met with our colleagues during Finapolis, and one or two innovative solutions become available on an annual basis. But looking at Ethereum, for instance, they generate thousands of smart contracts on a monthly basis. The smart contract that gets generated there in Ethereum is almost similar to innovative solutions within the payment systems. Blockchain, in theory, actually, enables you to generate a lot of innovations that could be used. The question is how ready the system is, how ready the system is to introduce and apply those solutions. However, the potential is pretty high. And we see that the technology is really perspective. So the next question is Belarus society ready for them? You know, we will try to test it in regards to the legal entities, and then we will work with the physical individuals. Thank you. All the best. And now, Melis, the question is yours. Is to you. We know that you now have the digital currency of the central bank. My question is for Melis. Sorry, Madam Nabiulina, that I didn't give you a chance to speak. Thank you for your question. So, dear colleagues, in the beginning of my speech, I would like to congratulate once again our colleagues. And yesterday, you've introduced the national standard, the QR standard. That's a very important move forward. And again, congratulations, dearest colleagues. That's a huge step forward in regards to developing the financial market. That was something that we introduced in 2019. And when we realized that we have to develop the online transactions, we realized that the regions were behind. So we included all of the payment clients into the national standard, and on year to year we have record making performance, you know. So we have zero commission. You know, everyone started using the common QR code. All of the transactions became free of charge. And then we introduced the public sector, and actually that ensured one more layer of support to the QR system. And going back to QR code and crypto assets, I believe that Kyrgyzstan is the leader of the region on CBDC. We're a bit behind. However, we try to not be the last. and our intention is to have a digital SOM. Kazakhstan has piloted it, and our intention is to pilot it next year. We're going through the testing stage at the moment. The company was identified, the partner company was identified, the blockchain provider was identified, the legal framework is ready, and we also have to address different dimensions in regards to legal framework development. So the testing is ongoing, as I've said, and next year, in the beginning of 2026, we will start piloting, and the public sector is also going to become an integral part of the system, of the digitalization process, and they will operate with digital SOM. The industrial implementation is planned for the 1st of January of 2027. Thank you. It's clear. Thank you so much, Melis. Madam Nabiulina, we know that CBDC is something that you have prepared. So the digital ruble is ready, but you would like to introduce it in September of next year. So could you please talk about the QR and so on, and the crypto assets? So the digitalization of the financial sector is comprised of many aspects. So in addition to central bank and biometry, and has many other elements. For us, it's a priority because it gives a benefit to the entire economy and all of the people, because it contributes to simplifying the transactions, daily transactions within the economy. Having listened to my colleagues, I realized that the common QR code is something that we are behind everyone else. We spent a lot of time discussing, so the law was adopted, and we had a large-scale discussion with the second-tier banks. Some of them were for, some were against, but I'm happy that we finally made a decision to support the spirit of the Eurasian Economic Union. So going back to the digital currency, that's a very important, proportion to stable coins, for instance. At the international arena, they discuss either digital currency of the central banks or stablecoin. I think that it could be both, as we have fiat money provided by the central banks, and online money is issued by the commercial banks. This is something for discussion, right? And in regards to stable coins, the discussion is ongoing. But in fact, in terms of the legal framework, we have it developed for digital transactions. The digital assets are pretty dynamic. They're less than the traditional one, but anyway, the tendency is growing. So we've been experimenting and piloting a lot. And let me explain why we decided to postpone launching the digital ruble. We would like to review the business models because we have to understand what true benefit for the society this is going to bring up. And the benefit is in dimension of the budget, both municipal and regional. We are going through a couple of experiments just lately. We had an experience with one of the regions, subsidies for dairy product manufacturers. The farmers receive those subsidies not only a couple of days later, but a couple of minutes later. For farmers, taking into account a high interest rate, that's a huge benefit, and the administration benefits are great. It brings up to 80 million rubles per year for that region in particular. To have the system working in an automated manner, having smart contracts at the budget level, but we still have to integrate them with the public informational systems. It's not only enough to have the digital ruble platforms. We have to automate the business. The next is smart contracts for business. of course, that's of great demands, and now smart contract could be made by the central bank only, and we discuss how this could be done by the business. Transgrant, it's going to be demanded as well. However, one of the conditions is to have the similar cybersecurity requirements towards those platforms. We have to go through those discussions. Yes, the perspective is clear, and we have postponed the introduction to September of 2027, but not because of the technological issues. From the technology standpoint, it's more or less okay and clear. We want, together with the market actors, to understand what services will be demanded by the clients, and there's going to be full-fledged introduction starting from 2027, and the large banks will have to provide services in digital rubles. And then there's going to be a turn for the universal banks, the licensed banks, and so on. And for physical entities, this is going to be totally voluntary. Voluntary initiative. So we would like to develop the digital services based on digital ruble for the benefit of the society. Thank you so much, Madam Nabiulina. Mr. Suleimanov, you are to close the plenary session. Yesterday, you briefed us about it all, and if there's something to add, please. Yesterday, it was a very prominent day. You became a winner of I won't say who. Thank you. Well, I'd like to greet this initiative, and I would like to thank you for this collaboration and constructive approach. You know, of course, there could be some complex decisions. You know, the banks are commercial organizations. You know, it's all about money. And whatever's been said, we are here together, gathered under the auspices of the Kazakh Congress of Financiers. I won't keep much of your time. So all of the initiatives that were listed, you know, is something that we work in a scrutinized manner. So digital tenge, the biometry was something that we introduced in 2020. That became a breakthrough digitalization for the banks. We provided the access towards the public databases, and it will remain the same. I mean, the approach will. And in regards to digital tenge, we are shifted from wholesale approach towards the public control, and we see a great synergy to consolidate with the databases of the ministries, and we have expensive fiscal policy, and the matter is how to ensure the quality, you know, so how much we spend for imports and how much we spend to stimulate the economy is a huge question, right? So actually we have to use the tools provided by the Ministry of Finance in a reasonable way. So we are to see the expenditures, you know, for instance, if you spend 20 billion to stimulate the economy, whether it was used to support the local farmers or to purchase imported goods, you know, so this is something that we get supported by the Ministry of Finance, and the President instructed us to use digital tenge not only under the Republican budget, but in quasi-budgets and local municipal levels. So this is something that we will keep working with our colleagues from the government. So CBDC and versus stablecoin, you know, we think that they could coexist. And Evolution was launched a month ago. And I'd like to thank all of those who have contributed. BTB, Transgran, stablecoin, wide spectrum is planned to be used, and there's a huge interest from inside and outside of the country, taking into account the liquidity, the turnover, and so on. We have large actors demonstrating their interest. I'm not going to be spending too much of your time. Those who are present here today are pretty aware about our plans and activities and the way we implement them. So whatever we could take from the digital world and have it successfully integrated into the traditional finance is something that we will keep being open to. Thank you. Thank you so much, Timur Muratovich. And yes, we're keeping precisely the agenda. So unique moments, we have 5 more extra minutes for the Q&A session. So actually, could you please introduce yourself? Good afternoon, so Timur Muratov, chairman of the leasing companies in Kazakhstan Association. So firstly, I would like to congratulate you with the official holiday and say that in Kazakhstan, despite the fact that the leasing is dynamically developing, it is not digitized in full. So the most digitized leasing is in Russia and Belarus. So could you please ask your question? So my question is for Mr. Yegorov and Madam Nabiulina. Do you plan to increase the role of leasing as alternative tool for SME, ensure the access to funded, and in addition to the second-tier banks instruments? Thank you. So as far as I'm concerned, you talk about how to ensure the access for funding for SMEs, right? So taking into account the high interest rates for SMEs being the most vulnerable towards the policy, we do have a special program to support small and medium-sized enterprises, and those are the governmental programs. And the central bank also does have its own program, and we have certain, moderate attitude towards providing incentive-based loans. This leads to making the loans for the other clients more expensive. That's a natural consequences. And actually, taking into account the decline in demand, that was something that we introduced. We had this practice back in the times of pandemic. We expanded funding from the banks provided by SMEs. We still have this program ongoing for SMEs. That was an exception made by us. Although inside the central bank, the vision is to have it closed, because the rest of the market enjoys much higher interest rates. So yes, indeed, we do have that exception made for small and medium-sized enterprises. Now those programs are targeted in order to support manufacturing enterprises and facilities and the most vulnerable SMEs. Plus, we take into account the specifics of SMEs under framework of the legal papers and so on. And now I would like to mention about a very important measure that is not only addressing the SMEs, taking into account the high interest rates, but we need to have a chance for the banks to restructure the loans, because many loans were taken for floating rates, of course, the expenditure grow. And the question is how to service those loans. So those banks that have been restructuring the loans for the business, for the payable business, if they see that the business up to 3 years is capable of going back to the financial performance discipline, we don't have it regulated. So that's a stimulus for SMEs, and small and medium-sized enterprise is at the core of our interests. We control the financial performance, access to loans, and the banking association keep analyzing the accessibility towards the loans by the SMEs, and this is something that we take into account within the remit of our policy. So, Mr. Yegorov, going back to the leasing, yes, indeed, lately we had very prominent growth of the leasing portfolio, and it has to be separated into two. There's a stand-alone program supported by the government in accordance with the order. So we provide quota for leasing interest rate for agricultural industry and for forestry. So those are two most important segments of the economy who have an access to funding. And number one priority is efficiency. For instance, we would disperse the money to all enterprises, no matter whether they're payable or non-payable, and so on. If the companies couldn't compensate, then it would be the local municipalities and so on. Now we target every single client individually. So again, that segment is very essential, taking into account the overall leasing portfolio, but it doesn't contribute to the high tempo and growth. So the second part is private, market-based. This is something that is expanding, and it gets expanded towards the legal entities and physical individuals, and this enables the business to have a flexible instrument to have an access to resources and to keep developing. And on the other hand, what we see is a growth in leasing for imported commodities, for instance, vehicles and so on. And this is something that is not being targeted by the central bank in regards to constraining the consumption-based leasing for imported commodities. So actually, we don't want to be having the consumption loans expanded. And actually, we have experienced when physical entities would leave the banks and would prefer the leasing organizations instead, so actually that allowed to have less risks in order to make sure that the payments are not equal to their monthly income, but at the same time it doesn't have any essential effect over the market, as 25% plus in physical entities was never demonstrated. So globally we will support the leasing market, as it is much more flexible tool of having an access to money than a standard banking loans. Clear, thank you. Let's give a round of applause. And maybe one more question, please. Good afternoon. I'd like to congratulate you also. It's not a secret. So, Madam Nabiulina, could you please tell us what are the mistakes of central banks trying to keep up with inflation? to keep up or to counter inflation, what we do is we fight against it. So the mistakes, different central banks make different mistakes, and we try to learn using ourselves, using others' mistakes, and going back to whatever we've done. I've made a reference of 2023 when we had a very high inflation, and we should have introduced a higher interest rate, basic interest rate, and the inflation was low, taking into account the structural changes. It was unclear, how the things work. So anyway, that was something that we should have introduced earlier. Last year, we had a mistake in terms of communications. We increased the interest rate up to 16%. Everyone thought that it was too high. And while communicating in the beginning of the year, we said that the interest rate is pretty high, the policy is pretty stringent, the inflation is going to go down, and the basic interest rate is going to go down again. And in the end of the year, we made a forecast for the mean interest rate, but the communication was that we will have the basic interest rate going down, and they didn't listen the second part of the phrase, which is the inflation will go down, so actually we would have more loans provided, hoping for the interest rate to go down as well. And we had consequently, two-digit in terms of maximizing the loans taken from the banks. So again, communication matters, and we tried it to be very clear, and we have to analyze our actions post factum, what's good and what's not that good, and what could be enhanced. Thank you so much for your question. It's very important. Thank you, Madam Nabiulina. You didn't provide an abstract answer, but a very concrete answer. So with this, not to jeopardize the next session and to have some chance to have a cup of coffee, let's close the session. Thank you so much for the moderation.
Құрметті ханымдар мен мырзалар, орындарыңызға жайғасуды сұраймыз.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, please proceed to your seats. We would like to open the second plenary session.
Просим вас занять свои места в зале. Начинает свою работу второе пленарное заседание Конгресса.
Елена Бахмутова, Тимур Сулейменов, Мадина Абылкасымова, Ринат Биктуров, Умут Шаяхметова, Тимур Турлов, Руслан Владимиров, Евгений Настрадин.
Добро пожаловать на нашу пленарную сессию.
So welcome to the second plenary session, Digital Kazakhstan, addressing the challenges in the financial market. So we won't keep you too long, and we need to finalize by 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So in order to have the tone for the discussion, I would like to start with a small presentation and cite the October report of McKinsey. So interrupted balance, what is historically expected. So in accordance to McKinsey, the world wealth is over $600 trillion, but starting from 2000, it is growing faster. And thanks to the incomes from securities, low interest rate led to small debts, and after the peak ratio that were in 2021 during pandemic, there was an inconsiderable correction. However, the considerable disbalance is still kept. For each and every dollar of investment, there's $2 of debt. And only the intensification of manufacturing, thanks to new technologies, may keep the balance and the wealth, as well as the economic growth. And the next review of the banks for 2025 tells us about the 2024 becoming a very profitable. So the common profit was $1.2 trillion, and that was the maximum in all industries. However, the capital markets are pretty skeptical in regards to that data. The assessment of the classical banks by 70% is lower than the traditional industries, and the growth in securities of banks is a consequence of the beneficial conditions of the market. So the changes in technologies, as well as the consumption and the shift over to fintech actually contributes to those expectations met. So the mixture of those factors may lead to the incomes of the classical banks is going to be less than the price of capital in many other regions. So in order to keep up and not to become the outsiders, there's a huge appetite for new solutions. I cannot but comment about the artificial intelligence. We've talked about that a lot, and there was a study completed in 2025. So AI review of 2025, it was called the Agents of Innovation. So as a result of the report, the financial institutions have been introducing AI very actively in IT, marketing and sales, risk management and compliance. However, what makes us wonder is that it is less intensive when it comes to strategy and corporate finance. And at the same time, while introducing AI, it's expected to cut the expenses and costs of banks by 70% in certain operations. However, taking into account serious investment, that cost saving is going to lead to 15/20%. And on the other hand, AI is going to be leading to less profit in banks because the AI agents will be used intensely to optimize the finance. And artificial intelligence changes the relationships between the banks and the clients, raising up the expectations of clients towards the hyper-personalized service. Especially it is typical for the younger generation. Now let's go back to our reality and the conditions that we're experiencing at the moment. We have to mention, as it was said previously, we live not only during the era of digitalization. Digitalization is the core of the economic strategy, and the major question that we pose in Kazakhstan is to make sure that there's a high quality of growth and the growth in terms of incomes. So we have digital infrastructure, Astana Hub, digital solutions, and so on. However, the question is, what can we do in order to have technology, regulation, and technology merged together during the digital era? So my question is for you, Mr. Suleimanov. We talked about the macroeconomic issues during the first session. However, it's inevitable to mention about the digital matters. So now we have the assets and debt growing faster than the manufacturing capacity. So in your opinion, Kazakhstan, taking into account that global tendency, what positions does it have, and what is going to be a priority for us? Is it going to be investment, debt, internal, domestic demand? Thank you very much, Madam Bakhmutova. I will try to stay within the time frame provided. And indeed, I believe that Kazakhstan is not left aside from the major shift when foreign investments get shrinked. And as it was said by McKinsey, that's a global tendency. Each and every dollar of investment taken into account the growth in real GDP is not that effective. And actually, we made an analysis on investment payback potential. For the last decade, we have 35+% in investment, and we had the almost 80+% growth in investment. However, the efficiency of labor grew by 6% only. Taking into account the favorable market conditions, we were supposed to be having a reversed effect. At least that was something expected. Of course, the efficiency is growing in many sectors. You know, if we split it up, the figures are different, and actually the efficiency could grow really intensely. However, the common economy's performance leaves much to be desired. However, again, we have to approach the issue structurally. So let's look at the private versus public investment. So public investment is growing, however, private investment is not growing that intensely compared to the public one. And it is traditionally is it a traditional opinion that the state is to invest into the common infrastructure, build thousands of kilometers of railways, automobile roads, grids, and so on. However, the state is not prompt to move, you know, and to change the strategy immediately. And the structural investment is really, really essential. If the trend is going to be left as it is, to have more and more public and quasi-public investment, then we will not be expecting the better efficiency of operations. So our objective as the representatives of the economy and the regulators to make sure that the private sector invests more as much as possible, and we need to have more private investment compared to the public ones. And secondly, I have to mention about the quality of investment. We can construct thousands of kilometers of automobile roads. However, when there's no turnover, be it tourist turnover, commodity turnover, then it is going to be just a waste of everybody's money, and the quality of investment will not be that high. So we have to approach the structure. We have to invest into the technology, equipment, modernization, and those types of investments are more essential than concrete and the other materials. And we have to support the industry and, of course, make corrections. Of course, the role of the private sector also is very, very essential. You know, we cannot just direct them where to invest. However, the development institutions have to strive to analyze within a framework of the project how much local content, how much the exports potential is, how much we have to invest into the manufacturing modernization and how this is going to be influencing upon the competitiveness. So the structure of the developmental institutions is something that is really important. So going back to the second part of the question, what is more important, of course, I believe that investment is the key. And from the overall demand, we don't have any issues. Even though we have the fiscal consolidation, we have pretty comfortable level of budget towards GDP. And again, if we accumulate the quasi-public operations, then it is even more. So we have a pretty modest development budget, but the model of economy governance is different. You know, Samruk, Bayterik, and other entities, you know, are the developmental budgets for Kazakhstan. You know, so it depends hugely on capex and opex, and we have to look at the general footprint of the public structures. So actually, we do have the issue that has to do with competitiveness, both internal and external. So this is something to tackle. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Suleymanov. Yes, all of these three aspects are really important. Investment is needed, but not any investment is good to go. And professionally, we are to analyze what types of investments are of demand and mature enough. We have to mention about the maturity of the financial structures. So, Madam Abulkasimova, you chair the financial regulator. Despite the attempts of using the administrative measures to provide loans for the industry players, so as a regulator, you are responsible for the financial development and overall stimulation and legal framework development. Based on the reports, it is evident that we could make a breakthrough thanks to the strategies, and actually the accuracy of strategy is something really essential. Do we see any opportunities available at the financial market where we could actually act not only thanks to the scope, but actually thanks to the accuracy? Perhaps we need to provide more freedom. What is your opinion? Thank you very much, Madam Bakhmutova. Yes, the major priority for us is the financial stability, protection of our clients' money. This is the top priority. So the financial stability is the core for any financial regulator. All the rest is something of the secondary importance. But the understanding is that the technology breakthrough in financial sector leads to really considerable changes. And again, the financial sector is characterized by the concentration of large-scale banks. So 5 banks accumulate 65% of the banking assets. That's not an exception, and perhaps a similar situation is seen in the neighboring countries as well, but taking into account the technology modifications, we have to mention about the challenges, of course. The banks do have much more opportunities to invest into AI, human resources, IT solutions, because of the scale, because of how much they possess. However, what do other companies, other financial organizations have to do? Are they smaller scales? How to compete with those giants? And lately, what we try to do is to make sure that we balance with the stress assets, with the corporate governance, risk management, to have the unified practice over the perimeter of the entire banking sector to ensure a better quality of banking service. And that was something that we managed to achieve thanks to supervision exercises, QR, the stress tests, risk management. Those are the items that we have addressed already. So now we have the unified banking practice, and the technology preferences, access to database, access to technologies, and other preferences enabling to scale things up is something that we have to take into account. As those banks do have larger access towards the data in regards to the clients. So this becomes a barrier for SMEs. You know, we converted the microloan organizations into the bank, you know, so they had 400 billion as a portfolio, and it is comprised of small and medium-sized enterprises. So what investments do KMF is to take at the moment, you know, compared to the banking sector? Again, there's a gap, a huge gap, and we will need to eliminate that gap. So we created the conditions to support SMEs. The microloan organizations, in addition to the basic license, will have the additional one. But now we have to provide the credit proportional regulation. And again, responding to your question, we're ready. We're ready to provide the proportion-based regulation. This is the top priority for microloan organizations, for securities market, and so on. So we're, you know, for instance, in the past, we would have it arranged in a more stringent way, and now we are able to use the risk-oriented approach. So what needs to be done for new microfinance organizations and for the smaller banks? There's a clear understanding that the access towards technologies has to be equal. So what the National Bank is doing, for instance, the common QR, the biometry, the common payment financial infrastructure. So what elements it is comprised of, and what access is to be provided for different financial organizations. This is the key component the regulator is to be responsible for. And again, I'm taking the banks, you know, so the banks purchase technologies and put it under their property. So we're ready to contribute up to the 15% when it comes to investment into IT companies and marketplaces, and the only issue that we have is the venture capital, because the risk, in our opinion, is too high to support. However, the proposals that we received from the banking community were taken into account. Now, the marketplaces, the mixed services could be supported by different banks, but the mid-size banks, they cannot make those huge investments into high tech. So they were starting to look for the accurate, precise solutions. So banking as a service, became their strategy, because the key is to ensure the access to the clients. The clients prefer service. If the service could be accessible through the banks, then they would pick the bank. And at a certain point of time, we have to make sure that the services are not discrete, and we have to make sure that the banking is open. There shouldn't be any closed infrastructure, so nobody is to have the access to the database of clients. This is not going to be enabling us to have artificial intelligence solutions, because AI is a need. It is the issue of the overall performance. So actually, those are the issues that we have to think about, and this is going to be an agenda for the second stage of engagement. Thank you. So you think that within the framework of the new law that is going to be adopted by the end of the year, and the bylaws that will be enacted accordingly, so they will provide the opportunities to break through for small and medium-sized enterprises, not only representing the banking service, but the rest. And we will come back to this issue. We will take about the just performance and the access towards the market. So the major issue everyone is concentrating on is investment and how to attract the investment. Of course, the financial institutions support bringing more investment, but not the market, but the securities. However, transboundary investments are really essential for Kazakhstan. So the question is for you, Rinat. So as a manager of AIFC, as the governor of it, you are the hub for the digital assets, you are prominent and mature structures, so the experiments that you have conducted within the perimeter of your hub are approaching the general market. So let me ask you a question in regards to transboundary investments. Is there any chance for AIFC to become a new payment balance for Eurasia as an innovative platform for long-term investment? And how AIFC is planning to attract capital towards innovative sectors of economy? Thank you, dear Elena Leonidovna. Thank you so much, dearest colleagues. And I would like to congratulate you with the Day of the National Currency. And in an informal atmosphere, we congratulate each other with the Day of Financier. And from the bottom of my heart, I would like to congratulate you. Thank you. So in regards to your question, allow me please to start with the objectives. AIFC was established, and we could actually divide it into three scopes. So the first one is to bring more investment, and the constitutional law in AIFC tells not only about the foreign, but overall investment. So AIFC is in structure. Is purpose to allocate capital, both external and internal. So for the 5 to 6 years, we have established the institutions, as AIFC is based on the institutions. So legal framework and its infrastructure, the entire set of legal acts, different legal forms, and so on and so forth. And the second tier is disputes and litigations. We do have the arbitration center. So in order to build trust towards those institutions, we needed time. We needed to have a support from the state. So Mr. Suleimanov being the part of the administration, and the president keeps talking about the AFC. And actually this leads to a better trust in our institution, both externally and internally. And for lately, yes, indeed, we established the AFC as a full-fledged sector. And you could analyze the number of companies. We have 4.6 thousand companies, and almost 50% of them were joining AFC for the last 2 years. So the joint ventures and the rep offices got registered at the AFC. And many of those projects are still going through a design phase, and the true investments are expected in the upcoming years. So we have projects run by Nацдар, for instance, and Amazon Kuiper is one of the potential investors. I can make references of the wide spectrum. But in regards to supporting the investment instrument, that's something for a long run. So the next area is the capital market development. So Astana International Exchange and the overall the securities market, Kazakhstan completed the first IPO, and the exchange has matured, and it's developing dynamically. And in October, for 7 years, we approached $4 billion and $2.8 billion is something that we have accumulated for the last 2 years. It takes time, indeed. And we experienced a lot of innovations. Sukuk, the green bonds, investment in Arabian dirham, yuan. Perpetuation will be, had the first issue, the opportunities to list in different currencies. We had the first ever dual IPO with Hong Kong. So our objective as an infrastructure to create the tools, and then the market is going to use those instruments. There were tools that were not of demand. They still exist, but they haven't been used. And the next one is the asset management market. We gotta have the basic platform, not only to use our tools, and jurisdiction also really is really essential. So we have different proposals how you could structure the funds. So the Bitcoin innovations. So now we have the private crediting funds. We have the REIT funds at the moment that are purposed for warehouse infrastructure and creative industry. So in 2025, over 50 new funds were registered. EUM, the common assets are quite modest, but for the 3 years, they grew up to $2 billion, and this trend is ongoing. So again, I'd like to reiterate that when it comes to infrastructure and tools, this is something that we're responsible for, and we also have to raise awareness, and we have to provide explanations on how to use the infrastructure. And it's important to do it not only for the foreign actors, but also for the local actors of the market as well. So I'm so pleased for me to be invited for fintech summits, for the congresses of the financiers. It's very, very important for the domestic market, and that's a great signal saying that as regulators we provide the innovative instruments. And you mentioned about digital instruments. AIFC is going to be the first jurisdictions to start working with these tools, and a true breakthrough was demonstrated in 2022. But the National Bank, the Agency for Financial Monitoring, and AFC agreed about the pilot project to merge our crypto exchanges and the banks. And since then, the market received an impetus. And now, together, we have been introducing that practice within the perimeter of our jurisdictions. So, and the second part of your question that has to do with the environment at AFC, yes, AFC is a unique jurisdiction, and we have a chance actually to put together the West and the East. I should mention about the Middle East and actually Kazakhstan has joined it, and that was done in order to engage the investors. And the first IPO with Hong Kong is something that the case to follow. And we have potential issuers. And of course, we have structured many regions. And our intention is to work with the local capital, and there was an interest from China and Russia. And in case if you think about starting your operations in our EDGM, Hong Kong, and other jurisdictions are competitors to us, but we are keeping up a good positions. Thank you. Rinat, as far as I'm concerned, you see yourselves as a platform. You are to propose different tools, the most advanced, clear for any categories of investors who could enter the exchange, but you don't provide the targets, enter this sector, that sector. It's up to the investors on what to invest in what sectors. Yes, of course, it is the state of Kazakhstan identifying the public policy, and they provide the insights for the investors or joint projects, and through the development investment institutions through Samruk, this gets executed. Yes, indeed, AIFC is a platform enabling the rules of the game. We're ready for dialogue, and we're ready to introduce new solutions. AIFC is all about infrastructure. Thank you. Since we're talking about the investment and the productive investment in particular, that's a priority in regards to the public policy, we have to understand what are the most effective institutions exist in order to attract those investments. And now the question is in regards to the second-tier banks, but we have to be fair saying that the size of capital is up to 15%, and the structure of business sectors for the short term actually immensely have only 2 to 4% provided by the second-tier banks. So actually we could come to a conclusion that in regards to this space to develop, there's some space, and however the banks are institutional investors, and not only the banks. And my question is towards you, Madam, as the chairperson of Halik. So what is the role how do you see the role of the banks in other strategic programs of the government? Well, first of all, I would like to greet our distinguished guests to our forum, to the Congress of Financiers of Kazakhstan, and I would like to congratulate the participants with the professional holiday and with the day of the local currency. I keep repeating that the banks are in the avant-garde of the industry, and we are one of the most progressive industries in the economy, and actually we support the digital solutions and innovations. And there were risks that the telecom companies would replace banks, and there's going to be more service provided by the telecom companies. But actually the banks have demonstrated that when it comes to introducing technologies in savings, payments, investments, providing the client-oriented service, and any other office operations, scoring modules, risk management, marketing, and the rest is something that will remain our prerogative. And we've been discussing the crypto issues, the stable coin, and having a digital tenge and other currencies in a digital format. So in this essence, the banks have been expanding their services, and not only the purely bank services, but non-banking services as well. So the bank currently is an ecosystem. So the marketplace, tourist-oriented services, entertainment. This is something that the banks provide an access to include the access to the governmental services. So actually the contribution into the digitalization of the economy from the banks is immense. We provide banking services for fintech companies. So bank as a service is where we provide an opportunity for fintech companies to make transactions or provide services using our platforms. Yes, indeed. There are different types of banking platforms. It could be either open or closed, but we are open and we provide the partners banking services at the back office, and the banks contribute to M&A, to procuring the small-sized startups, and we provide funding to support those initiatives. And this is how we expand client experience and service. And from the digitalization standpoint, I believe that Kazakhstan is a leader, not only from the leader of the neighboring countries, but also within the global perimeter. And the level of digitalization in financial services brings us to top 10 from all around the world. And this is something that we have to be proud of. But at the same time, I have to mention that today we have to keep the balance and ensure it at all means, not only the balance from the digitalization standpoint, but also from contribution of the state into providing access to those digital services. Regretfully, what I've seen so far is that there's an attempt to engage the state more and more into the competitive markets, into the market with a lot of private actors providing the services. It could be the messengers, it could be registration services. For instance, the most recent reference could be made towards the registration of the interest rates and registration of the other options. And so the rest is the infrastructure. Infrastructure from the legal standpoint, infrastructure from ensuring a good bandwidth and internet, good telecom services, and coverage throughout the entire territory of Kazakhstan. But when it comes to yellow pages services and to make sure that there's a monopoly of the public companies is the next area the state shouldn't be interfering into. We have to leave it for the private market players. We have to make sure that there's a competitive market, and we shouldn't be entering that space. Just lately, yesterday, we announced a common QR, and that was a process that took us a couple of years, and that was the initiative that was proposed a couple of years ago, and the envision was that the private actors would cover when it comes to generalized payment platforms through QR. But we insisted on the public interest because it comes to national security. protection, and in case that there's some external threat. And we're really glad that this has happened. And yesterday we presented it to the leadership of the country, and that was coordinated by the National Bank. So actually this is something that is justified when it comes to stability, when it comes to security and safety of the state. This is something that we have to do. But when it comes to startups, that could be constrained from the development standpoint, because the public role is growing and it is too much. We shouldn't be over-regulating the private market, and there has to be a reasonable balance between the interference into the commercial activity and control over the infrastructure establishment. And again, let's go back and talk about the role of the state. The banks, of course, keep their role, which is to provide loans for the economy, but the role of the state is growing as well. And we have to provide loans to the real sector of the economy, and in October it was 12.5, and the public funding grew by 25+%. And again, there's a disbalance. The public and quasi-public organizations enter the commercial funding market, and this creates non-competitive conditions for the second-tier banks when it comes to providing loans, as there's less interest rate provided by the public players. And at the same time, the internal and external debt has grown folds, and now it's almost $25 billion. So therefore, we have to ensure a balance in these matters. So where there's a private sector, no matter, it could be financial services, it could be any other industry, it could be fintech, you name it, or marketplace, it has to still remain led by the private sector. Thank you very much, Umut Bolotkhanova. You have touched upon a very hot topic, and it's inevitable to mention about that. So the presence of the state in the economy. So you named the figures, and I can tell you more. The National Bank will publish a report named loan credit practice. So only 30% of loans provided for business is provided by the second-tier banks, and 37% is provided by public institutions. And the quasi-public organizations, Samruk Kazana, provide direct loans towards their subsidiary companies or social entrepreneurship corporations. They don't go beyond the perimeter, right? So the share of the direct public funding is going to be even more. And again, there's a discussion again around having specialized banks. Those are going to be public banks at the moment. We have two. That's a normal practice. We had the Development Bank of Kazakhstan and Ұлттық Bank, which is the instrument of development. Now there's a discussion around agro bank and the rest. So actually, the sector that used to be private since we gained our independence, now it is going through the stressful times, and now the discussion again is around whether to ensure the presence of the state in those structures. So Mr. Suleimanov, the government has announced about the proactive position of the national investment holding by Terek. And the proactive role is expressed thanks to the credit shoulder, when the capital is provided on an annual basis by the state. And they will provide the loans to the economy. 1 trillion is going to be given, and 7 will be raised, and then 8 trillion is going to be provided to the priority industry players. and they will do it almost directly without having second-tier banks engaged. So, Mr. Suleimanov, what is your opinion, whether this is going to ensure quality growth in economy, and won't this lead to the growth in quasi-state sector? So thank you so much. Yes, of course, this will lead automatically, and we will need to gather it all together, both externally and internally. And of course, let's go back to the targets, right? We had the banks, the bankers, the financiers, and so on. And the financial sector has its own expectations and so on and so forth. And you have to have a clear understanding in regards to what the government is asking for and what the real sector of economy is demanding. So actually, we don't have any fundamental challenge in that. So taking into account the structure of the economy, taking into account the fact that we are the neighbors of very large economies, and we are the members of the free movement of commodities within the framework of the economic union. Of course, it's very complex for us. There's different technology in possession in those larger states, and therefore they look at the public institution of development enabling a better competitiveness. So that's the first message. The second message is that the objective of the government is to change the structure of the economy or to change the structure of the industries. The small enterprises can change it as well. However, again, based on our specifics, there has to be so-called ice-breaking projects, coal chemical practices, petrochemistry, multi-billion projects, those are the transition projects that will actually lead for us to have more semi-commodities and raw materials provided to the other industries. And actually, the system, the industry cannot do it independently. So, as a national bank's chairman, as an economist, if you ask me whether it's a successful practice or not, I wouldn't have any objections. I think that we are to run the large-scale projects, and we support the projects run by Samruk and Veterek. And it's important actually for us not to have the KPI to have more loans provided. As soon as you're given the resource, as soon as you have your KPI, you do whatever possible in order to, address the KPI, because you are responsible. You will make sure that you adjust them towards your mandate, and you will just declare that they're breakthrough projects and so on. So we have to make sure that the target is clear, accurate, and that's the first item. So we shouldn't be rushing for the projects that the market is able to fund itself. That's in addition to the, of course, transparency, and we shouldn't be having a situation when the quasi-public sector raises money, internally and externally, and then it's only 10 to 15 projects that are truly transparent. And the second item is syndicated funding, and there was a proposal for any Byterex project 50-50 to be funded by the private investors or creditors. So 30-70, 50-50, as a principle, that's a good approach. And again, we keep a dialogue with Byterex, with the Ministry of National Economy, and with the government, saying that the balanced approach is something that we need to practice. So what I would like to say is that we have a good understanding in these mechanisms. So our intention is to publish the macroeconomic stability-oriented program, and perhaps some items will be discussed during the negotiations and mutual solutions that we desire to find. So we understand the reality, we consult with the colleagues, and we are being understood. Thank you so much, Timur Muratovich. I have no doubt that the compromise is going to be found, and extra money is something that isn't going to hurt the government, but an expertise is something that we need to have. You know, we need to have a good expertise of the financial market, and I think that it is much better than the one the public or semi-public organizations possess. And let's go back to our instruments and digitalization, and not only digitalization. So, Timur Ruslanovich, Mr. Turlov, my question is for you. You chair Freedom, comprised of financial, non-financial organizations, and our draft law that is going through very hard discussions at the government of the parliament is about to be adopted, and it will be most likely becoming valid since the 1st of January of next year. So let's talk about the digital financial instruments. What intentions do you have in this regard? Do you have an intention to issue them, or will you assist its turnover? So my major question is, what are those tools going to help us do to manage the investment, simplify the calculations and estimations? So what is going to be given to the economy and society? Thank you so much. Well, actually, you know, I remember pretty well and still memorize one of the messages the American Securities Commission tried to translate when the digital financial assets just popped up. You know, they said we're not for or against digital assets. It's any form of assets as any other, is anything else. But the types of securities as they are based on the logics. They're based on substance. You know, there's a debt, there's shared, there's currency as a separate financial instrument. You know, so you know, there's some derivative financial instruments for the basic financial instruments and so on. So you could actually have the securities in papers. You could keep them in centralized registers, decentralized registers. So do you follow the securities legal framework? You cannot change the form without changing the essence of the process. For instance, register the prospect of issue, right? If your intention is to have shareholder capital, you know, there's rules once you bring equity. You know, the financial innovations and the changes in terms of the form is logical. But and indeed, those forms could evolutionate from repository institutions to decentralized ways of storing and acknowledgement of property. It could be the debt, the share, and so on. But I have to repeat myself that the financial instruments and the form of the financial instruments doesn't change the form of the relationship within the market. However, we have to mention about the less costs that have to do with trust transactions and other items. But we have to keep the essence of the financial instruments and the regulation that was helpful for those instruments. And undoubtedly, of course, we don't have any interest in ignoring the new forms of financial instruments when they appear, when there is more or less evident regulation. But my message is, let's not have a great regulatory arbitration when you would have the same instrument which in essence could actually be regulated differently. In one case, for instance, you would have the complex way of registering the financial instrument. You know, the industry will get adapted to any rules, no matter how abstract, how nonsense they are. So actually, there could be the switch in terms of the jurisdictions and so on. And actually, the important item is to get adjusted towards the future practices. And I'm so happy, actually, indeed, to have our legal framework becoming more and more mature. And I'm glad to the fact that there's a linkage towards the national legal framework so that our clients have a clear product. And I wouldn't underestimate or overestimate the strength of the financial institutions. Why? As, again, we can talk about that ability of the financial instrument, to act speedy. When you pay with your card abroad, you could actually have zero technical challenges, but the legal framework is something that could slow down the processes. And actually, those are different practices that we could experience. The payments using the telephones are immediate, right? And they are cheaper than all of the transactions. And the centralized database is going to be speedy and less expensive than decentralized, but this could actually be supported with the specifics of the regulation. You could actually regulate centralized easier than decentralized, and actually this could lead to the system of constraints. You could regulate whatever is regulated, and it's hard to regulate whatever is dysregulated. When technically there is a challenge, you could have the deviations and that are not the result of no good will, but the constraints of technology-based nature. I will repeat myself. I think that the digital assets, as any other assets, as gold, forex, securities, both local and foreign, in regards to and that asset is to be accessible for the clients, and they are to be accessible in the interfaces that they trust. And they are to be at the front line of the bank, so that it is clear for the clients, so that they could understand where it could lead to a direct profit, and not to let those instruments be used incorrectly. Thank you. So there was one more channel of ours to discuss, but in fact, it is not going to be leading to any cardinal changes. That's about the comfort for the clients. So I would like to go back to the equal conditions for competition at the market. So Madam Abulkasimova mentioned about the access towards the technologies, and we need to have the platforms, the databases, and there has to be the interference from the bank. So, Mr. Vladimirov, you represent the Bank Center Credit, the chairman of the management board, and you use a lot of digital services, and you've been promoting it very, very proactively. So what is your opinion? The artificial intelligence everyone is referencing to, can this become a reason for a lack of equality? For instance, when you don't have money to invest, can this become the reason for inequality? And should the state be impacting upon it? The mechanisms, what mechanisms are to be used in order to ensure the equality? So is it just to have the state to interfere? Should we redistribute? What is your opinion? I would like to support my colleagues and congratulate all of you with this holiday. And again, going back to your question. Yes, of course, we live in years of market economy, and large banks do have an access to large data, and that was before the AI was introduced, and perhaps in a short-term run it will remain. But in addition to the advanced elements such as ChatGPT, there are other players, that were responsible for the technology, and actually the access to AI is similar and equal for all, right? And the question is how to use it correctly and what data is to be used. So what is to be analyzed by AI, and what is going to be the platform for the models to be generated. So actually it's important to have an access towards big data, and we have great services, and we're thankful for having an access, and if it is commission-free, then it would be even better, as everyone is to have the access towards this data. In regards to the equality, yes, perhaps there's going to be unequal access for a short period of time, as there are some parent companies who do have, amongst the shareholders of the banks, who do have the larger access towards the markets and so on. So inequality is something that is still the reality. So my question to you is as follows. So in your opinion, what are the perspectives of the open API and open banking? How perspective are they in? So what is going to be the application for those and the access towards those tools? So we have banks, non-banking companies, fintech companies. Open banking, in my opinion, is something that is enabling the economy to become more transparent. So actually the client is to have an access to the accounts placed at different banks through one interface. And when there's an access to this information, yes, indeed, there's going to be a competition for this given single client. So we are all for it. We're all for the open banking, and we contribute to all the pilots the National Bank has initiated. So the QR, the digitalization of the physical entities, we would have the access towards all of the accounts and the customized assistance. And during the other FinTech summit, we discussed how they integrate the big techs and purchase in the banks, and then the banks evolutionize in a different way, so the fintech, big tech is to merge together. And a couple of words in regards to the law. So you mentioned about the chance for the fintech to be funded by the banks, and overall the banks won't be able to cover 360-degree coverage in regards to the demands of the clients, right? So at least our strategy says so. We treat our operations saying that the non-banking services could attract clients through the applications, and their applications would become our applications. So generally speaking, we will have more e-clients for the bank, and there's going to be a huge plus for the consumers to address their demands using just one application. Clear? We also do have the representative of the non-banking sector so the mobile operator, and at the same time it's a fintech company. So Evgeny Ivanovich, my question is for you. You are represented in Kazakhstan not only as telecom but as financial service provider. So where is there's more freedom? Is there more freedom in non-banking sectors? So there was a proposal for us to have not only payment organizations but also fintech companies into the perimeter of QR. So will you apply for a banking license? In accordance with the new law, you may request for the basic banking license or additional one, so-called universal. Thank you so much. I would like to congratulate you all with your professional holiday and with the Day of the National Currency. I would like to wish you to be prosperous, sustainable, and wealthy. So, Beeline has identified a form of how to develop financial services, not being a bank, not having a banking license, and this is all around the partnership. So every single business, even the represented here during this panel discussion, we all do have our own digital products. We all have our very prominent and strong services. So actually shifting from the instrument towards the partnership actually enables us to use the strongest components of the service. So the major objective for us is not just to have the license, right, but to be relevant for our clients. And we have 12 million clients, 12 million clients, I would like to reiterate. They use the service provided by the Beeline. And we understand what types of needs the clients have, and we understand what they prefer to use, and so on and so forth. So actually, for us, it's important to provide the service the clients needs it. And we do have a financial solutions. The product called Simply, it's not just the product, it's a center for digital ecosystem. You know, you could issue a card, you could actually have it reflected in a digital form, you could have cashback and so on. And that's something that we provide for the client without having a banking license. And of course, we do have a partner represented by the bank, providing the products merged under our application. So again, when it comes to partnership, when it comes to interaction, this is something that we truly mean. And again, if to comment the interests in licensing, there are different types of licenses, right? There's a license for payment organizations of the first category. There's the basic licensing in banking and so on. But I think that when we realize finally that for further development we need to have a license, we will actually tackle this issue. So far we work with insurance companies, leasing companies, banks, and the clients are happy with the spectrum of services, so we're happy with the current status we have. Madam Abulkasimova, do you see the wide spectrum of opportunities? And actually, we could provide different services, right? But the bank is responsible for the eventual result anyway. So going back to the beginning, you know, we mentioned about the trend, and we said that there's going to be AI agents for the consumers, and this is something that we're not going to be able to suspend or stop. And in your opinion, should these agents that will be provided directly or provided through non-regulated structures, do they have to become a subject to behavior-based supervision and monitoring? So you mentioned about the solutions and the report that is going to be generated together with the National Bank. It's going to happen soon? So, Madam Bakhmutova, we don't have much time, so let me provide a very brief comment. So we didn't manage to regulate those fintech services that are being provided by non-banking actors, and we didn't have enough time to have that portion included. But we plan to regulate it. We plan to regulate it. This is inevitable, totally. So the basic principle, there's the same risks, same activities, same regulations. So this is the basic principle every single regulator uses, and what we see is a large number of companies, fintech, telecom companies, started providing loans without ensuring the protection of the rights of the clients, and the interest rate is not being regulated. So again, that's unequal competitiveness, right? So the banks invest a lot of money, so the rights of protection, we have requirements, now we have behavior-based monitoring, and there's a whole cluster of companies that do not comply and provide the same services. We have to think about the balance, of course. Undoubtedly, there has to be a balance of not stopping the innovations and development, but at the same time to protect the rights of the consumers. We have to identify the risks to be regulated, and that's something that we didn't have time for. And next year, I believe that we will have this issue addressed. So actually, the Congress is going to be having one more objective. So, Madam Abulkasimova, we have to act in a very balanced way. And in regards to AI, so we do have open systems, but once you have a large bank and your system and the access to clients, the data that you could use for machine learning using the artificial intelligence. In case if you have operating in a disclosed matter, you receive a preference, right? But the other entities, they don't have a chance to train their models and to have the machine learning in full-fledged capacity. So now it is becoming more and more essential. So 75% of banks use AI in certain sectors of their activities. And AI agents, yes, indeed, the report is going to be published, and we will scrutinizing the risks. So we don't think that every single risk is to be regulated. For instance, if you use AI technology for some activity and it has low risk, then there has to be a totally different regulation when it's all about the systemic risks for the performance of the entire financial organization. So there's going to be a very detailed report that we will discuss with the market, and we need to have very thorough discussions. It's not going to be happening over time. Colleagues, we almost don't have time. We would like to close with a quiz. So where are we going to find ourselves in 5 years? So very briefly, please. Well, we will see a different landscape in financial system. Money will become smart, programmed, and it's not going to be the payment process for some commodities and transfer of money from point A to point B. It's going to be a chain that is targeted at closing the transaction. We will use tokens, bitcoins, to complete the transaction. In my opinion, in the future, there's going to be a hyper-personalized demand that will lead to proposals, and we will have AI agents available for the individual consumers and for the banks. So actually, we will fight for the attention of the clients. I believe that we will discuss 5 years later drastic transboundary competition and dependency of the local market from the transboundary operations, and financial sector's contribution in GDP is something to be discussed as well. So the interest time is to come. So the global companies get themselves distributed in the internet, and Google, for instance, becomes more and more evident, and when it comes to the architecture of cryptocurrencies, we have to mention about the individual structuring, and globally this is going to be the trend as well. I believe that we will discuss not the banking regulation but overall regulation in regards to the services and protection of rights of consumers, and there's perhaps going to be the regulator for AI as well. So yes, indeed, we do have the regulations in regards to the services, not the entities, and we will talk about the digital assets and the changes, the prompt changes, the coins. Is going to become the alternative ways of funding and providing the loans. So risk management is to be good to go for them as well. So the capital market will go through the transformation of the structure, and I believe that we will have less questions because the infrastructure is very complex. We have underwriters, brokers, custodians, and so on. This is going to become obsolete, or it will be very, very simplified, and we will go forward the capital market. I agree that the traditional banks will disappear, and we will see the development of the tendencies, and we will have more large-scale organizations possessing technologies popping up, and as a regulator we will have the priorities. So equity, liquidity, protection of rights of clients, no matter what form the institution is going to be represented by. So it's hard not to agree. Structurally we will have less role of the traditional banking and the loan provided by the bank, and we hope for the securities market to evolve, and no matter what is included, the digital, non-digital assets, and the decentralized finance is going to become a challenge for the banks. So taking into account our conditions, one of the important challenges is the role of the state in the financial monitoring, and the colleagues that you named, of course, is something that we have to get ourselves prepared for in order to ensure the stability of the financial system, and for us to remain leaders, not only in this sector of economy, but also a good reference of the best international practice. Thank you. So, dear participants, so today's discussion demonstrated that Kazakhstan is at the edge of the digital era, and financial institutions are not just the participants but the architects for the transformation. So the future depends on us, and the competition is not identified by the scale. It identifies with the promptness and ability to create value for the client. I would like to thank the participants to the panel discussion for a great dialogue, and this will become an impetus for the future strategic decisions. Thank you so much, Madam Bakhmutova.